One thing that it seems to be happening is the language is starting to change in the sense of, hey, this is something that we're going to have to live with. It's just we have to continue to move on. As that happens, has the conference and trade show space, have they started changing? And then the second part of that question is, what's the lag time saying from the time they're like, hey, we're having events to the point where you can actually schedule, plan, and have an event? I mean, you can't just on the snap of a finger say, hey, we're having our trade show tomorrow. I mean, there's some lag time involved. So has more planning started, and how long is that lag from the time that you plan to the time that you can kick something off?
Well, planning is, if I can answer that question and knew the real answer, Tim,
yeah,
I would have more money than Virgin Galactic. Anyway, it's very, very difficult because the trade show industry, there's two sides. I call it all one-to-many events. So one-to-many events are anything from you having a party at your house to having a CES, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a bunch of people put together. If you're going to do a trade show of any kind, which means you're going to have a booth of some kind, or even you just have a table and a pull-up banner and, a table throw or something, it takes about 3 months of planning beforehand, and sometimes more, because you have to find a space at the convention center. You have to sign the rental contracts for your floor space first. And you usually have to do that 3 to 6 months out in order to get any kind of good spot with good visibility. And then you got to work with a firm like ours to get all the logistics and things handled for you. And then you get down to the wire where everything's pretty much ready to go. Most things need to be at a convention center about 3 weeks before the show starts. So when you consider all that lag time, 3 weeks is a long time right now when the CDC gets on TV or Dr. Fauci or anybody else, at least is related to COVID, and says, well, it's going up today. And then a week later, it's going down. Or you should wear this kind of mask or that kind of mask. And it changes people's decision making. If it's an outdoor event, it doesn't seem to matter too much because most people will go to an outdoor event, not care about COVID. So, and then there's the other side of it, which is kind of like the remote worker thing now. So companies are going, do I really need to do a big trade show? Maybe I need to do 10 smaller trade shows. A good example of that is we finally got to do a big trade show with a client, and it was in Orlando. But their normal spend for their trade show was about $200,000. This year, they had the same size booth. They cut it down to about $50,000. And they only sent 2 people instead of 12 people. So it changes a lot, and they were able to pull out. But in talking with the CEO, he said, Mike, just want to let you know, we're probably not going to do this show anymore. We've made the decision. Instead, we want to buy 10 or 12 smaller booths from you. And then, I'm sorry, hang on just a second. And then we're going to give them to our executives and salespeople and business development people and that, and they're going to go out and do regional-based shows. So that's starting to happen. The industry is starting to sell more portable booths and that than the bigger booths.
Do you think that's going to sustain? Is this smaller model is what we're going to see, or do you think we go back to the bigs?
Well, it's for the guys that specialize in doing the big booths, that do really, really large ones. Luckily for me, there's only 3 or 4 that do booths that are bigger than, say, 100 by 100 square feet, because they're logistical nightmares. They require a ton of people to work on them, lots of good connections. It's a lot of money, a lot of cash put out up front. So those people have been having a really hard time. And the smaller companies and the ones that contract a lot like we do are doing okay. It's the guys in the middle, like always, that are getting hurt.
So I'm curious how the supply chain and logistic things that are happening, has that had an impact on you and the space, the trade show space?
It's had an impact. Yeah, well, sure. The show down in Florida that we just did, give you a good example. They were dragging their feet to finishing signing the contract because they weren't sure what was happening. They finally decided, okay, we're going to scale it down to this. It's going to look like this. We need a hanging sign. And said, fine. We signed the contract. The next day I started placing the orders for the hanging sign and that. Well, it turned out when I went to purchase the hanging sign, nobody had one the size that we needed. And there's only about a dozen companies, maybe a little more than that, maybe 20 that do these fabric hanging signs. And I finally found one that said that, yeah, we can do it. We've got the parts. Everybody else was running out of parts because they come from China. So they had the fabric that they print here, but they didn't have the aluminum frames to stretch it around. So the company said, sure, it's fine. We get down to about 2 weeks before the show, and I'm panicking and going, hey, guys, where's the sign? It should have been here 2 weeks ago. And they said, oh, well, we got a problem. We ran out of tubes. I said, so how do I get a sign? He said, we don't know. So I had to go back to the company and tell them it's a company that's an international company. They're based in Turkey and also Silicon Valley. And I had to let them know that, hey, I know you already paid for your sign, but you're not getting a sign this year. And the CEO's like, and people find us how? We're obviously getting our money back, right? But how do people find us?
So is it full refunds? Like, what is the situation of that? Like, how do you, like, okay.
Had to give them their money back. Sure.
Wow. What?
So all the hours on the phone, and maybe not hours, maybe it was 3 or 4 hours, calling different places around, people that I know, people I don't know, people that referred me to others. It was kind of like scrambling for toilet paper. Remember when we were scrambling for toilet paper in town? And somebody would call, or they'd go on Nextdoor or Facebook or something and go, hey,
yeah, I sold a bunch of that.
Got 10 rolls.
I was selling 6-packs for $200.
Yeah. I was selling face masks. We went into the face mask business for 6 months.
Well, I remember that, right? They were $30, $40 a mask.
Yeah.
It felt like it. It wasn't that much. But.
Well, that last conversation, we did talk about how much the markup was. Maybe it was like 30 or 40%. I don't know, but it was a crazy markup.
Yeah. And now it's done kind of the flip thing since it came back on. If everybody would remember, for some reason, the public has a limited memory. When they were talking about masks, they said, well, it's better to wear a cloth mask than nothing, which is true. But they never came out and said a cloth mask is just as good as a disposable mask you'd get in a hospital or something. But don't buy the ones that the surgeons in the hospitals use because they're in short supply. So now they're saying cloth masks are bad. You shouldn't wear them at all because they really didn't do you any good at all. It just made you feel better. And the regular masks are okay, but you really need to have a KN95 or an N95 mask. Mm-hmm. So all the people that supply those have now brought those in. And instead of them being 30 cents, they're $2 a piece. And as a distributor, you got to buy at least 1,000 or 1,500 of them at a time. And the CDC could come on the air a week from now and say, you don't really need those. The disposable ones are okay. And then you're stuck with all of this inventory.
Is a lot of the mask stuff, is that still coming from China? Or
not all the masks. We say a good 85% are made in China. They're all American companies like 3M and MacRite. They're the two biggest ones. Right. And they come from China. Everything.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing. Like 2 years ago, everyone was like, yes, we got to reduce the dependence of critical supplies like this away from China and bring it back to the States. So has any of that happened yet? Or is it still people have a short memory and they forgot?
No, there were a couple of companies that did it, and they did surprisingly well. But they tried to ramp up their manufacturing, and like all things made in America, it's more money. And people would go, oh, I'll just wear a cloth mask. I'll wear 2 cloth masks. My grandmother made one. My wife made one. I'll wear both of them. I should be okay. And I'm all boosted and vaxxed and all that stuff anyway. So what's the harm? What's the chance?